Today's stories do cover some disturbing subject matter, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you'd like to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, gracias. I think a lot of people would probably say that their freshman year of high school was pretty rough. And I'm sure a lot of those people are right and had valid reasons as well. I'm definitely not one to say that they were just being dramatic because I, too, had a pretty bad freshman year. I didn't like to talk about it for the longest time because I had some pretty bad self-esteem issues as is, but I've healed and have become a lot nicer to myself since then. And also, I've come to understand that I also didn't deserve or warrant any of this, so I have no reason to blame myself. As my story goes, I was going to be a freshman at our local high school. New school, but it was the same school district, which meant that I would at least have friends there so that we could all be nervous and stressed together. I was a pretty normal kid growing up, or so I thought. I was the oldest of four, so I was the first to go to high school. I wasn't outgoing, but I wasn't reclusive and shy either. I had a good amount of friends, and I did fine in school too. I always passed my classes with minimal issues. I hated math, but I got through it, and I turned in a minimal amount of homework late. I didn't stand out in class or make myself known either. I was just there. But then things went a bit different in high school. Most of my classes were fine, except for my chemistry class. Science was one of my favorite subjects, so I typically didn't have any issues. But chemistry, at least in depth as we went into this class, it seemed to be more of a challenge for me. Not to mention, the teacher did not help either. When I first started attending the class, I immediately got the feeling that Mr. Pendleton was going to be a hard-ass. He was very curt in his speaking. He didn't really joke around, and was always on a very specific schedule. He would get upset very easily if someone interrupted him during a lecture, including slamming his hand down on the desk or the whiteboard. He would do this ear-piercing whistle to get people to pay attention. He was always just very intimidating. I always thought it was weird to the point that if kids bothered you so much, why even be a high school teacher? Anyways, I did my best in that class, but I admittedly struggled with locating the elements on the periodic table and remembering their symbols. I knew some of the common ones, but struggled with the rest. I tried asking him for help, like if he had any suggestions on making it easier, but with a dead stare, he looked at me and said, "Just memorize it. It's not that hard." I walked away from that conversation thinking that I was truly in the wrong, as if I was the only one that ever had issues with it, and that's how I took it. Over time, I did not get better in that class. I continued struggling with some of the topics, and Pendleton did nothing to make me feel better about it. When I got my assignments back, he didn't just mark things as wrong, he would put some mean comments next to them, making me, again, feel like there was something wrong with me. We had a monthly quiz that we took going over all that we learned that month, and when he was passing out the graded quizzes, he would hand it to some saying things like, "Do better, study next time," but never encouraging or optimistic words. Then he got to me. He flipped open my quiz and asked a question out loud, calling out a specific person to answer. He confirmed it was correct, and then pointed out my incorrect answer. He tossed my quiz at me and let the whole class know that I had the worst grade, singling me out. Everyone was staring at me, and I had never been more embarrassed. I felt incredibly stupid at that point. I put my head down, feeling the eyes burning into me. I remember actually going to the restroom and crying. My parents did ask me about school and weren't dismissive, but they also didn't think the situation was that bad. I do blame myself for part of that, as I didn't really tell them how bad it was or how much I hated that class. I told them about how I didn't like the class, how the teacher was really unnecessarily mean, and how I seemed to be singled out. I showed them my assignments with his remarks. I told them about being embarrassed in class and how I seemed to be the only one affected by it. They agreed that he seemed pretty mean, but said that they would talk to the principal about it. I even spoke to my friends and others that were in his class, and they all agreed that he was a complete jerk, but didn't understand why I was being picked on so much. Except one friend that usually excelled in a lot of classes. He basically blamed me, saying that I needed to study more, and that he was just trying to push me to do better. I wasn't friends with that person for much longer either. So, while I waited and hoped that my parents would actually be able to make a difference, I tried to push through the harsh words and embarrassment, and really worked my ass off to at least pass the class. I had friends that helped and devoted a lot of time to get through it. But I did it. When we took our quarterly test, I passed it with a low B, and I was very proud of myself. Apparently, Pendleton was not impressed by this, though, as he slammed my test on the table and he made sure to ask out loud, "Did you copy off of X's test?" X being the person that sat next to me. And they looked at me funny too and actually started sitting somewhere else, so yeah. That didn't make me feel better either. He said because he couldn't believe that I miraculously got better overnight. I was pretty upset and quite frankly fed up with being treated like this, so I defensively told him no, and that I had studied more and he wasn't willing to help us. The room was silent, and the tension was thick, but I felt pretty good for saying it. Pendleton, however, was not amused, and told me that I needed to stay behind after class. I was not looking forward to that, and, in fact, I tried to blend in with everyone and leave at the same time, but he definitely noticed. He called me out with his booming voice, halting me in my tracks. I waited by the door, and once everyone left, he told me to go over to his desk. He then asked me why I told the principal that he was bullying me. I replied that I didn't say anything to the principal, which was true, and he yelled at me again, saying that I was lying. He said some other unpleasant things to me, but for some reason, I was just over all of it. And I yelled back at him that I had told my parents that he was being a jerk, and that he shouldn't be a teacher. He responded back by slamming me against the whiteboard, holding me by my shirt, and once again yelling some pretty hurtful things at me. I was honestly expecting him to try to hit or strangle me. His face was beet red. I could see the veins in his temple bulging out. I was terrified. Thankfully, Miss Stewart in the class attached to the right knocked and opened the door to see us in this position. I wish that she wouldn't have knocked because the knock was enough time for him to let go of me. But judging by the look on her face, she knew that something was wrong. I was in tears and I walked towards her to leave. She asked me if I was okay and I said no, and Pendleton just sat back down at his desk. I went to the nurse and asked her to call my parents, as I'd gotten sick, so she did. When my mom came to pick me up, I told her what happened, and she immediately took me back to the school and to the office. She went to talk to someone about it, and I just remember sitting there worried that Mr. Pendleton was going to show up in the office. After that day, my mom would take me to school after the second hour, which was when I had his class, and I just collected my work for those first 2 classes. Miss Stewart also reported what she saw, so I guess having a witness was what gave the principal, or whomever, the authority to suspend Mr. Pendleton. I was entirely relieved that he was gone, and I could tell that I wasn't the only one. The first couple of days without him were weird, but the sub definitely helped lighten the mood. By the end of it, though, we were all able to be less formal and actually had a little fun in the class. I still had a hard time turning in tests and assignments, fearing that I was going to be made fun of or called out, and that anxiety bled over into my other classes as well. My freshman year was very difficult, and I struggled with my self-image, as mentioned. It slowly got better over time, but I think I really had Miss Stewart to thank for that. She helped me build my confidence again and really assured me that it wasn't me, but Mr. Pendleton. She actually confided in me, saying that she had heard him shouting on many occasions and even at students from other and past classes, but that she had never seen him put his hands on any other student. I still wonder today if I was the only one, or if there were others that just were never caught or never said anything. Hell, I still don't understand why I was singled out so hard. I know I wasn't the only one that wasn't doing well in the class, but I was the only one that seemed to be targeted. And I don't know why. He never did return to our school, and I did much better after that. I just hope that he was never able to teach again, if that is how he treated students. Hello. I used to be a teacher for many years, and for multiple different grades. It was my career for a good chunk of my life, and I enjoyed it. I loved children, and I always loved being able to teach them something new, and I hoped I could do at least one thing to spark something in them to challenge themselves, ask questions, and follow their passions. I would like to believe that I made an impression on quite a few, but I know that I wasn't everyone's favorite, and that's okay too. Of course, even though I looked for the best in all of the kids that walked into my classroom, it wasn't always easy. I did have some challenging ones, but I still showed them as much patience as the next student. My story is about one of those kids. I'll refer to him as John. John was a pretty troubled boy, if it wasn't obvious just from his home life. He had been held back a year, so while he watched his friends graduate, he was still sitting in school. I knew he just had his dad around, not sure what happened with Mom. I don't want to say his dad wasn't good, but maybe more so that he just wasn't around much. There were times that he had been called to the office or had to leave due to fighting, and he would have to wait for someone else to come get him because his dad was always busy. John's words, not mine. I was used to seeing John in the halls and other classes more, but due to the changes in the curriculum and his free study hour, I now had him in my classroom twice. His demeanor was like some of the other kids. He would lose focus during the lecture or do something else. He would try talking to others or even try to be disruptive, but I didn't humor it. He was treated the same as the other students. I might tell the class to keep quiet or something similar, or I may even involve him in the discussion. I never did it in a way to try and call him out specifically to embarrass or punish him, but if someone else asked a question, I may tie it into a previous discussion and ask someone else their opinion or take, including him. His answers started as just an I don't know or agreed with the previous person, and then he started giving some wise Alec answers. To those, I would keep going with it. I was an English and a debate major, and I could clap back, if you will. The class found it amusing, and, quite frankly, I could tell if I was getting to him. Whether it was a bad thing or a good thing, I'll probably never know. Over time, I felt like I was really breaking down some barriers with him, but he still had his bad days, such as everyone else. I think we pretty much had some unspoken rules between us and even my classroom that everyone was aware of, which helped in cementing the idea that they were responsible for their own actions, work, and time management. I bring this up because there were a few occasions where John was having a bad day and was obviously in a bad mood because of something that happened. I've told them that they're allowed to have bad days, but my classroom was to be used as a safe room. Do not start or plan fights in my room, don't take it out on me or other classmates, and to respect the property of the room, i.e., don't punch my bookshelves, kick other people's backpacks, etc. In fact, it may sound silly for some high school students, but I had a small desk that sat next to mine in the back of the room so that no one could look at you as a safe place. I had books, exercise sheets to help you keep calm, coloring sheets and blank paper, tissues, all kinds of things for the kids. They were allowed to go over there anytime they needed their own space. There was even a sign they could use indicating that they wanted to be left alone or wanted someone to talk to. I had a lot of kids, even ones that didn't have me as a teacher, that used that desk. I wanted a place that they could go that wasn't just wandering the hall or skipping class and getting into trouble. To my surprise, John had just had an argument with another teacher. It was just words, and as he made his way to my classroom, his fists were clenched. I watched as he walked in the classroom and he paced like he was about to throw a punch. However, he took a deep breath and actually went and sat at the desk with his arms crossed, tapping his foot. He had the "Do Not Disturb" sign up, but hey, I thought this was an incredible improvement. He stayed like that for most of the hour, other than writing something, but he then took the paper with him. Anyways, this was how he started behaving in my classroom. I found him paying more attention, participating in discussion, and when he wanted to be left alone, he sat at the desk. He even greeted me and would say goodbye for the day. But there was one day that was entirely different. I saw him while he was at lunch, where he looked angry and, again, got into a shouting match with another student. They were pretty close to each other's faces, and I feared that a fight was about to start. Now, I'm a pretty small woman, so there's no way that I was going to be able to stop anyone, but I did approach and try to de-escalate. Another male teacher noticed and he stepped in as well, which broke the two up. I didn't see John again until his class with me. He walked in, very angry, and immediately went to the back desk and sat there tapping the table. We continued with class as normal, but at some point during the lecture, John abruptly stood up, causing the chair to make that loud screech, and stormed out of the room. I got a bad feeling, so I excused myself and tried to follow him out of the room. I saw him heading towards the front of the building and call out for him, but he didn't even turn around. I went back to my room and called the security desk to let them know, and they told me that they would walk around for him. I finished that class and the rest of the day, actually, with no information on where he went, and no one else had seen him either. It wasn't until the next day that I got some information. The day started as normal, but my class with John wouldn't be until after lunch. I didn't see him anywhere in the halls, and no one else that I knew that he associated with had seen him either. Then, right before lunch, I received a call on my desk phone during class. When I answered, it was the security officer asking me if I was okay. I kind of laughed because obviously I was, and I asked why. He told me that he would explain soon, but then advised me to lock my classroom and to not let the students leave either, even if the bell rang, until he arrived. A bit concerned and curious, I agreed and hung up the phone. It was about midway through the hour, so the students were just working at their desks at this point, and I was left thinking about this call at my own desk. I had a horrible gut feeling that this had something to do with John. The security officer made it to my room and said the kids would be free to go to their next classes at that point. He then asked to speak to me since it was my lunch hour, and I agreed. He told me that they had found someone walking around the back of the school, but they were wearing a hoodie so they couldn't see their face. When they went to stop him, he had tried to run but didn't get very far, as they had already called for the police. It was John. They brought him into the principal's office, called his dad, and were questioning him why he was there and not in class. The more alarming part was they found an airsoft gun in his backpack, as well as a knife and a folded-up piece of paper in his pocket. The paper had a list of names on it. My name was on that list, but it was the only one with a question mark next to it, and then was crossed out. They were worried that something had happened, causing my name to be marked off, which is why they called me first. Everyone else on that list, including the teacher, were people that he did not get along with in some way. I was shocked and heartbroken. He obviously struggled with some inner demons, and I honestly felt that because I challenged him, or maybe stood up to him, I was added to that list. But I think he realized that I didn't challenge him in the way that he normally expected. I challenged him because I saw through the bullying, or maybe I'm completely wrong in that thought, but something changed his mind. I never learned what that could be, as he was expelled for the rest of the year. I fought to at least be able to let him finish the year, as he was almost done, but the school board wouldn't allow it. They didn't inform us teachers of this prior, but they said that it was because he had been kicked out of previous schools for similar outbursts, but not like what we experienced. I never heard about John or what happened to him after that, but I also never saw or heard anything in the news, so I guess that's important. All I know is that I'm now a very strong advocate for mental health. I was before, but this whole event with John really made me see that there are people out there suffering through things that are hard for others to imagine. If you know someone that is struggling, please reach out to them. It could honestly save a life. This happened towards the end of my senior year of high school, and, unfortunately, is something that was just as memorable as the rest of the year. I will not be sharing my location or school, and any names I use will be fake because, technically, I was not the victim here, so I don't want to invade their privacy any more than I already have. I still feel it's important to share this story as a way of helping others and to stress the importance of, if you see something, say something. I don't know if it's the same for other high schools, but it was quite common for the seniors to pull some kind of massive prank on the school as a whole. They were supposed to be harmless. It was like a universal rule so that no one got kicked out or suspended. It was also typically done around spring break, giving them time to execute it. So, to keep with tradition, several of us seniors, including myself, started plotting our scheme. The school was going to look like a glitter bomb went off in it. We had tons of glitter and confetti that we had bought from random party stores, and a few bulk bags on eBay for a stupidly cheap, possibly shady price. One of my friends, called Jesse, was our golden ticket as he was a teacher's aide, which meant he had access to the rooms that had all the spare keys to the classrooms. We started the day before spring break started. There were a lot of teachers and faculty there, as they were probably wrapping things up for the break, so we waited outside in one of our cars while Jesse went in to look like he was working on some last-minute things for a teacher. After a few hours, People slowly started leaving, so he let us in through the south door and ushered us into different rooms to fulfill our plan. It started out completely smooth. We got through several classrooms, almost ran into one teacher but managed to hide from them. We all even got a good laugh about it too. Then we came across the classroom of Mr. Jackson. Mr. Jackson was the media teacher, and he was actually pretty cool. I guess when it's an elective, we tend to like those more anyways, right? The class was awesome. We made different media-related projects, such as our own radio broadcasts, recorded and put together a new session, including local/national news topics, sports, and weather. It was actually a lot of fun, and interesting as Mr. Jackson used a lot of his own equipment. So, we were working with some very expensive and high-tech cameras, microphones, and even the software was pretty advanced. Mr. Jackson was laid back and easy to talk to when it came to anything from the assignments to more personal things. He was even a bit of a prankster himself. When he caught someone sleeping, he would do something harmless, such as having us all leave the room, turn the lights off, and have them wake up confused. Like I said, pretty harmless. So when we came across his room, I didn't want to do anything to the equipment, but I wanted to do something additional or extra to his room, knowing that he would appreciate the prank. I started looking around the room to get ideas of what to do when I started going through his desk. In the bottom drawer, I found several tapes similar to the ones we used for our projects. In fact, I recognized the names of some of my classmates on them. However, I also found 2 tapes that only had a label of Class of '92. This caught my attention because, at the time of this event, it was not the year of 1992 or 93, or even in the 90s for that matter. My curiosity now piqued. I decided to take one with me, thinking I could use it for the prank, or maybe it was a memorable class and could do something special for him, as a farewell or a graduation gift. In regards to the prank, I just covered his desk with glitter and filled one of the tape cabinets with it too. I had 2 friends with me in that room that saw me with the tape and wanted to know what was on it as well. So I agreed to let them know or watch it with them if they wanted. We left the school that evening, mission successful, and agreed to watch the tape the next day at my place since I had a VCR in my room. However, I couldn't stop thinking about the tape and what could be on it, or what could be so important to keep that specific year. So, I decided to watch it that night and would just let my friends see it the next day. I know you all have probably already figured out where this is going, but to this day, I still fight myself if taking that tape was the right thing to do. The tape started during what appears to be a graduation ceremony and then cuts to that same classroom. The room was almost completely empty. A few people walked past the camera and you could hear the door close. What was still on the camera was a girl in the second row from the front. Then, I watched Mr. Jackson walk by the camera, towards the door, and then started talking as he walked towards the girl. There was some innocent conversation occurring at first. He asked her how she was doing, how her older sister was, and even what her plans were for winter break. Then, the conversation changed to the homework or projects. She shyly asked him about how to do something, and he pulled out another camera, as well as a sheet, and started explaining it. But while this was happening is where my stomach started to drop. I saw Mr. Jackson place his hand on her knee, and then said something quietly to her. I could see their faces, and she definitely did not seem interested in this, nor reciprocate in any way. There was some more one-sided conversation while his hand moved from her knee to her thigh. I was frozen with fear and disgust. After about 20 minutes, the tape cut back to the ceremony and there was nothing else after that. It was pretty obvious what this was, and the ceremony was used as a mask. I was terrified. I knew Mr. Jackson, and in fact, I knew the girl in the video. We had a different class together, but I was only an acquaintance with her, really. But I did have a friend that was pretty close to her. I didn't know what to do or who to show this to, since we technically shouldn't have been in the school at the time. I was still a kid, so I didn't know if I would get in trouble if I told them. Instead, I tried to ask my mutual friend to talk to her, but I tried to be vague, not wanting to talk about the situation. My mutual friend, Katie, did not take the media class, so I asked her to ask the girl about the class. Ask her if she had troubles and how she felt about the teacher or assignments. The next day, Katie asked me if I was having troubles in the class because of the girl's reaction. She said she thought the class was okay, but when Katie asked about the teacher, she got quiet and didn't want to talk about it. So she assumed that she wasn't doing well in it. The feeling of something being very wrong only got heavier in my mind. It was still spring break at the time, so I could only dwell on it. I even admitted to my friends that I tried watching it, but that something was wrong with it, and it didn't work. I didn't want them to see it for their, and more importantly, her sake. When we did return to school, I found myself watching him more closely, and realized that he was the same as I remembered him. Except, I saw him glance over at the girl many times throughout the hour that we were in class. That night, when I got home, I told my parents everything. I told them about how I found the tape and what was on the tape. I gave it to them, but I don't know if they ever watched it. I assume they did because what I was accusing a teacher of was very real and very serious. I can be quite the jokester, and always tried to keep the conversation lighthearted. This is not something I would ever bring up in a joking manner. So, I'm sure my parents trusted me on that front too. They told me that they would take care of it, and that I needed to just go to school as normal. The rest of that week, I tried my best to act normal, but it was hard to not want to go off on Mr. Jackson. It was hard to not want to go to that girl and tell her that I was sorry for what she went through, but I didn't. Thankfully, I only had to go 2 days like that. The third day, we had a substitute teacher. Everyone took it at face value that we were just getting a free day, but I think I knew the real reason. The rest of the week continued with that same sub, and then we were told the next week that Mr. Jackson wouldn't be able to finish the school year. I was so relieved, but also concerned as the girl wasn't in the class that next week either. The rumors started to spread pretty fast in the school. Someone claimed they actually saw the police at Mr. Jackson's home, and then they tried to determine why. Then, many of the students started talking about how Mr. Jackson was pretty creepy, or how something about him was off. Then there were rumors that some student came forward with certain claims, and then the local news and letters sent home to our parents confirmed that this wasn't a rumor, but the truth. The rest of this was information that I either got from the news, my parents, or people around the school. He was charged with multiple things and went to prison. That I knew. But then I learned that when the girl was confronted, she told her parents and authorities what happened, and several other girls came forward with claims as well. They also mentioned that there were multiple tapes found with not only similar things to what I saw, but others where he seemed to stalk the girls. I was also friends with a guy whose sister actually came forward, which made me feel like all the other claims were probably true too. I mean, there was physical proof of at least one, and he was brave enough to keep it at school. So I absolutely believed there would be more than just the one. The first girl that I saw in the video stopped going to our school, and I learned that she was homeschooled. Sometimes I went to stop by her home to see how she was doing. but I didn't want to worry her or her family when a strange guy showed up. Obviously, this has been many years ago, and we've all since graduated. I don't know whatever happened to that girl, and I don't think she even knew that I may have been the one that put the whole thing in motion, but I hope that she's doing okay. So, I know it wasn't exactly me that was affected, but it was still pretty terrifying to see, not to mention knowing that I had to have had some impact in changing some people's lives. Who knows how long he may have continued with his horrible acts if I had just kept that to myself. So that, my friends, was a collection of 3 genuinely creepy as hell teacher stories. Stories, well, I guess one was from the perspective of a teacher, but the other 2 were stories about teachers that were creeps. And disgustingly so. And it's really disappointing to hear and read these stories, in my opinion, because whenever I was in high school, I wanted to be a teacher. I actually had an English teacher that inspired me, that made me want to be a teacher. I never went down that path, obviously. I went into IT instead, but I originally wanted to be a teacher. But my point is, teachers and instructors like this should inspire and challenge and help these students grow to be something great and, productive members of society, I suppose. And then to read these stories and to hear these stories where the teachers are just creepy pervs and assault the students, it actually really, it irks me really hard. So, anyways, hopefully you all enjoyed the stories. Enjoyed being a strong word, but hopefully you got the entertainment value you were looking for out of these stories. I'm not sure how to say that any other way, so yeah. Anyways, if you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, please consider subscribing, as that does help tremendously. And if you would be so bold, please consider leaving me a comment down below, letting me know your thoughts, how you're doing, if you ever had a creepy teacher that you had to deal with. Don't have to go into detail. Just maybe say, yeah, I had a creepy teacher. It was this teacher that taught math in 9th grade. I don't know. Anyways, friends, I hope you're all having a beautiful day and a beautiful weekend. And, of course, until I see you again, remember, you are loved, you are valid, you are important. You're the best you that you can be. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. I'm gonna go make lunch. Yeah. So, until next time, much love, and sleep well.